In the center of this world sits a small, blue cat named Gumball Watterson. To anyone watching from the outside, his life seems like a simple series of silly misadventures. He runs through the halls of Elmore High, gets into trouble with his brother Darwin, and causes chaos wherever he goes. But if you pay close attention to the ground beneath his feet, you begin to notice the small cracks forming in the pavement. What makes this town so strange is not just the strange creatures walking its streets, but the way reality itself bends around them. You see, Elmore was built on a very fragile foundation. It is a place where different styles of existence are forced to live side by side. Some residents are made of paper, some are drawn in 2 dimensions, and others exist as complex 3-dimensional objects. They walk down the same sidewalks and attend the same classes, yet none of them seem to question why their world is put together this way. They simply accept the rules they were given, completely unaware of the larger structure holding them in place. And this was only the beginning. Consider the daily routine of the Watterson family. On the surface, they appear to be an ordinary, chaotic household trying to make ends meet. Nicole works long hours at the Rainbow Factory, carrying the weight of the entire home on her shoulders. Richard sits in his armchair, largely detached from the demands of adulthood. And the children move through their days with a strange kind of immunity to physical harm. They fall from incredible heights, get caught in massive explosions, and see their home completely destroyed, only to return the next morning as if nothing ever happened. We treat this as a simple joke, a light-hearted rule of animation. But if you look deeper into how their world functions, this constant recovery is not a gift. It is a strict restriction. The citizens of Elmore are bound to a cycle that refuses to let them change. No matter how much damage occurs, no matter how much pain a character endures, the world forces everything back to its original state by Monday morning. It is an endless loop of reset buttons, keeping everyone anchored to the exact same roles forever. And this was only the beginning. Think about what happens to those who try to step outside their assigned roles. When a resident of Elmore stops serving a purpose, the town does not gently usher them away. Reality itself begins to notice the inconsistency. The universe demands balance, and in Elmore, balance means every single person must play their part without deviation. When someone strays too far from their designated path, or when their story runs out of lines, the environment around them starts to glitch. Textures fail to load properly. Colors fade from the background. The air grows cold and quiet, filled with the faint, unsettling hum of static. It is a silent warning that the floor under their feet is getting thinner. Gumball and Darwin move through this world with a quiet, unshakable confidence, believing that their choices are entirely their own. They believe they are simply living their lives, making decisions, and exploring their neighborhood. But behind every door they open and every corner they turn, the walls of their reality are gently pushing them back toward the center of the stage. Let us move deeper now, away from the familiar hallways of the school and into the quiet, forgotten corners of the town. Consider the strange, delicate existence of Anton. Anton is a small, simple piece of toast who attends class alongside Gumball and Darwin. He is quiet, polite, and largely harmless. Yet, if you watch his life closely over time, a deeply troubling pattern begins to emerge. Anton does not merely suffer accidents, he dies horrifying, violent deaths on a regular basis. He is crushed, burned, eaten, and destroyed in ways that no child should ever experience. Yet every week, Anton walks back into the classroom, completely unharmed, with no memory of his own destruction. To the rest of the students, this is just another bizarre feature of their daily life. Nobody questions how Anton keeps returning. Nobody asks where he goes when his body is destroyed. But if you follow the quiet country roads leading out of Elmore, past the suburban houses and into the isolated countryside, you find a small, secluded home surrounded by high fences. Inside that house sits a specialized, high-powered toaster oven. This is where Anton's parents spend their days. Whenever Anton meets his tragic end at school or in the streets, his parents do not grieve in the way a normal family would. Instead, they calmly walk over to the counter, prepare a fresh slice of bread, and place it into the machine. Through a process that blends domestic baking with cold, systematic replication, a brand new Anton is baked into existence. They download his memories, slide his small shoes onto his feet, and send him back out the door to catch the school bus. Think about the quiet horror embedded in that daily routine. The boy sitting at the desk today is not the same boy who sat there last month. He is a copy of a copy, carrying a synthetic set of memories designed to keep him moving forward. He does not know how many times he has ceased to exist, nor does he realize that his entire life is being carefully manufactured in a kitchen on the edge of town. And this was only the beginning. Now turn your attention to Terry, the small paper bear who spends her days avoiding every possible form of contact. Terry is obsessed with cleanliness. She carries hand sanitizer wherever she goes, washes her hands constantly, and panics at the slightest hint of dust or germs. On the surface, it looks like a simple case of extreme germophobia, played for laughs in a busy school hallway. But when you remember what Terry is actually made of, her fear stops being a joke. Terry is a single, fragile sheet of paper living in a world built for heavy, solid objects. For Terry, a single drop of water is not just uncomfortable, it is a lethal threat that could dissolve her face and destroy her structural integrity. A stray spark, a friction burn, or a heavy gust of wind could rip her apart in an instant. She lives in a state of constant, quiet vigilance, aware every second of every day that the slightest touch from the physical world could end her existence permanently. Her germophobia is not a quirky personality trait. It is a desperate, daily survival strategy in a world that was never designed to protect something as delicate as her. Let us look closer now at the quiet weight carried inside the Watterson home itself. Consider the overwhelming burden of Nicole Watterson. To anyone watching from the outside, Nicole is an unstoppable force. She can run at supersonic speeds, punch through solid concrete, and intimidate giant monsters with a single glance. When her temper flares, her eyes glow with a terrifying light that makes even the most dangerous creatures in Elmore back away in fear. Yet behind that incredible strength lies the deep, quiet exhaustion of a woman who carries everything alone. From her early childhood, Nicole was pushed toward absolute perfection by her strict parents. She was taught that her worth as a person depended entirely on her success, her grades, and her ability to stay in complete control of her environment. Every mistake was treated as a failure, leaving her with a constant, quiet fear of falling short. When she grew up and chose to start a family with Richard, she took on the entire weight of their household. She works long, grueling shifts at the Rainbow Factory under a difficult boss, earning just enough to keep the lights on and the pantry stocked. She returns home every evening to a house filled with broken furniture, unpaid bills, and children whose daily adventures regularly shatter the laws of physics. Her legendary temper is not just a funny character trait. It is the physical release of years of built-up pressure, a sudden outburst that keeps her from collapsing under the weight of her responsibilities. She fights for her family every single day so her children can live in a soft, careless world where consequences do not last. She carries the stress, the anger, and the fatigue so that Gumball and Darwin can wake up tomorrow completely free of worry. And this was only the beginning. Now consider Banana Barbara, a character who seems entirely lost in her own odd, silent world. Banana Barbara is the mother of Banana Joe. She walks through Elmore with a blank smile, often speaking in fragmented sentences and painting strange, abstract images on canvases in her living room. To the rest of the town, she is simply eccentric, another background character living out a quiet, unusual life. But if you look closely at the pictures she paints, something deeply unsettling becomes clear. Banana Barbara does not paint from imagination, nor does she paint memories of the past. She paints the future with absolute, flawless accuracy. Every brushstroke she places on a canvas depicts an event that has not yet occurred, from minor everyday accidents to major disruptions in the fabric of their town. She painted the exact moments Gumball and Darwin would find themselves in danger, long before they even stepped out of their house. She painted the collapse of reality itself, capturing the dark, static-filled void swallowing the sky while the town carried on as if nothing was wrong. Think about the quiet isolation of carrying that knowledge. Banana Barbara lives in a world where the future is already written, painted in thick layers of oil and acrylic on her studio floor. She knows what is coming for Elmore, yet no one around her takes her warnings seriously. She is trapped inside a story whose ending she has already seen, forced to watch the events unfold stroke by stroke, completely powerless to change the picture. Let us shift our focus now to the strange, quiet shadows that stretch across the school hallway during the late afternoon. Consider the desperate, hidden tragedy of Rob. In the early days of Elmore, Rob was just an extra. He had no prominent role, no special abilities, and no real presence in the stories unfolding around him. He walked through the background of scenes, sat silently on the bus, and passed by Gumball and Darwin without a second glance. He was simply part of the crowd, an unremembered face in a town filled with vivid, colorful personalities. Then, without warning, the universe decided he was no longer needed. When a character in Elmore loses their purpose, reality does not simply let them move on. The town slowly pushes them into the dark, silent space between the walls of existence. Rob was quietly pulled down into the void, a cold, static-filled dimension where forgotten objects, discarded ideas, and unwanted memories go to fade away forever. He spent what felt like an eternity trapped in that empty expanse, watching the bright world of Elmore from behind a wall of static. Yet through sheer willpower and a refusal to be forgotten, Rob did something no one else had ever done. He fought his way out of the void, clawing his way back into the living world. But the journey back took a heavy, permanent toll on his physical body. When he emerged, his original form was gone. His body was fractured into a jagged, pixelated mosaic, his voice distorted, and his features blurred like a corrupted file. And this was only the beginning. Upon returning to Elmore, Rob made a terrifying realization. The only reason he had been dragged into the void in the first place was because he did not have a clear, defined role in the story. In a world governed by strict narrative rules, a background character is always in danger of being erased. To survive, Rob needed to give himself a permanent purpose. If he could not be the hero, he would force himself to become the villain. He dedicated his entire existence to becoming Gumball's arch-nemesis. Every scheme, every conflict, and every trap he laid was not born out of genuine malice, but out of a desperate need to stay relevant to the main plot. As long as Gumball fought him, the universe would continue to acknowledge his existence. The moment the conflict ended, the void would open up to take him back. Think about the quiet dread Rob carries with him every single day. He acts out the role of a villain, enduring constant defeat, embarrassment, and physical harm, all to avoid fading into nothingness. His hatred is not a passion, it is a lifeline. He holds on to his enmity with Gumball because it is the only thing keeping his pixelated frame pinned to the fabric of reality. Let us step away from the isolated struggles of single characters and turn our gaze toward the hidden architecture of the town itself. Consider the unsettling, cosmic function of Richard Watterson's laziness. Richard is known throughout Elmore as a gentle, completely unproductive father who spends his days sitting on the couch, watching television, and sleeping through life. To his family, his total avoidance of work is a source of mild frustration and continuous comedy. He is a man who actively fights any form of physical labor, avoiding responsibility with a quiet, stubborn devotion. Yet underneath this simple running joke lies a deep, terrifying secret about how Elmore maintains its physical existence. In the famous episode where Richard finally decides to break his lifelong pattern and takes a job delivering pizzas, the universe reacts with sudden, chaotic, violent force. The moment he steps onto the street with a delivery bag, the fundamental laws of nature begin to break apart. Gravity reverses its pull, sending buildings and vehicles drifting into the open air. The sky turns strange, unnatural shades of purple and red. Physical matter loses its form, dissolving into strange geometric shapes, while the ground beneath the town begins to fracture into raw static. The universe was not punishing Richard for working, it was reacting to a sudden breach in its core mechanics. Richard's absolute refusal to contribute to society is not a personal flaw. It is a vital, cosmic safety valve carefully balancing the universe. Think about the quiet weight of that balance. Richard's total inactivity acts as a physical anchor for the entire town. His complete lack of energy absorbs the chaotic, unstable forces surrounding his family, stabilizing the fabric of time and space in Elmore. If he were to ever become productive, driven, or ambitious, the delicate balance keeping their reality intact would shatter beyond repair. His laziness is the silent price the universe demands to keep the sky from falling down on their heads. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the dark, hidden nature of the void itself, the vast, empty space waiting just beneath the surface of their daily lives. The void is not a place you can find on a map of Elmore. You cannot drive to it, and you cannot walk through its doors. It is the cosmic recycling bin of reality, an endless expanse of gray static and cold silence where the universe dumps everything it considers a mistake. Inside the void float forgotten toys, abandoned inventions, outdated trends, and entire pieces of land that were deleted from the world above. When an object or a person enters the void, a strange, tragic process begins immediately. The memory of their existence is systematically wiped from the minds of everyone they left behind. Photos change to remove their faces. Written records alter themselves to erase their names. Friends and family members carry on with their lives, completely unaware that someone they loved was standing beside them just moments before. It is an absolute, quiet erasure. To live in Elmore is to walk on a dangerously thin floor. Beneath every home, every classroom, and every quiet street lies an infinite ocean of static, waiting patiently for the universe to decide who or what gets discarded next. Let us turn our attention now to the school itself, where hundreds of young lives gather every morning under the humming fluorescent lights. Consider the quiet, desperate reality of Tobias Wilson. Tobias is a bright, colorful creature made of soft, vibrant cloud-like fur. On the outside, he presents himself as the ultimate smooth talker, rich, confident, athletic, and effortlessly cool. He wears expensive sports gear, speaks in dramatic slang, and constantly tries to position himself as the center of attention wherever he goes. Yet if you look closely at his actions, his entire personality is a defense mechanism built against the terrifying truth. Tobias lives with the quiet, persistent fear that he is not a main character. In a world governed by strict narrative focus, secondary characters walk a thin line between staying visible and fading into total obscurity. Tobias senses this invisible hierarchy better than anyone else in Elmore. He watches Gumball and Darwin move through life with a strange, magnetic pulling power that draws every major plot line directly toward them. Deep down, Tobias knows that if he stops making noise, the camera will simply pan away. This is why he constantly tries to buy his way into Gumball's inner circle. He offers his money, his video games, and his house, not out of genuine generosity, but out of a desperate need to share the spotlight. He challenges Gumball for leadership, attempts to steal his roles, and tries to rewrite every scenario so that he becomes the hero of the story. Think about the psychological exhaustion of living inside that continuous effort. Tobias cannot afford a single quiet moment of authenticity. He must always be louder, flashier, and more dramatic than everyone else in the room, because in his mind silence is the first step toward being forgotten. He lives in a state of quiet panic, constantly performing for an invisible audience just to prove to the universe that he matters. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the hidden, tragic mystery of the Wattersons' home itself. The house at 1026 Elm Street looks like a simple, two-story suburban home with light blue siding and a cozy front porch. It is the setting for quiet family breakfasts, evening conversations, and endless childhood games. But over the course of the town's history, this single house has been burned to the ground, crushed by giant monsters, ripped apart by localized black holes, and sent crashing through the surface of the earth. Yet every single morning, the house stands restored, its walls pristine and its windows sparkling in the sunlight. The town of Elmore does not fix the home through normal repairs or construction crews. The restoration happens overnight, in total silence, while the family sleeps. The universe simply rewrites the space where the house sits, resetting every broken board and shattered glass pane back to its default state. However, this daily reset carries a subtle, hidden price. With every reconstruction, small pieces of the family's past are lost forever. Photos on the walls slightly alter their details, old childhood toys disappear from the attic, and subtle memories fade away into the quiet air. The house stays standing, but it is slowly becoming a shell of its former self, a clean, perfect set built for a show that never allows the past to stay put. Let us sit quietly now with the mystery of Penny Fitzgerald and the burden of her true form. For a long time, Penny walked through Elmore trapped inside a hard, brown peanut shell with antlers. To everyone at school, this shell was simply who she was, a cute, polite girl with a gentle voice and a kind heart. But the shell was never part of her body. It was a prison, carefully built and enforced by her parents to keep her true nature hidden from the world. Inside that outer layer lived a shape-shifting creature of pure, unfiltered emotion. When Penny finally broke open her shell in the woods of Elmore, she revealed a dazzling, glowing entity that changes form based entirely on how she feels. She can become a terrifying dragon, a gentle winged spirit, or a giant monster of raw rage, all in a fraction of a second. Yet this freedom brought its own quiet terror. Without the hard shell to contain her, Penny must carry the weight of her internal state visible to everyone around her. She can no longer hide her sadness, her anger, or her fear behind a quiet smile. Every subtle shift in her mood manifests physically, threatening to alter her shape and impact the environment around her. Think about the quiet vulnerability of living with your inner heart completely exposed. While Gumball and Darwin see her transformation as something magical and beautiful, Penny must spend every waking moment practicing intense emotional self-control. She carries the knowledge that a single moment of absolute panic or anger could turn her into something dangerous to the people she loves most. Her freedom is real, but it requires. Let us drift further into the quiet spaces of Elmore, where the lines between what is real and what is created begin to blur even more. Consider the unsettling, hidden existence of the secondary characters who fill the background of every scene. In a normal town, every resident has their own private home, their own personal history, and their own quiet thoughts when the sun goes down. But in Elmore, the background citizens live under a completely different set of physical laws. When they step out of the frame of Gumball's daily life, their world grows still. They do not walk home to a hot meal or sit by a window to watch the evening rain. They simply stand in the quiet shadows, waiting for the universe to call them back into view. Think about the silence of existing only when someone else looks at you. Many of these forgotten citizens have no names, no families, and no defined voice. They are given just enough form to fill an empty desk in a classroom or walk past a store window in the distance. They feel the cool air against their skin and hear the faint murmur of conversation around them, but they know, with a quiet and persistent certainty, that their time is limited. The moment the main events move to another part of town, their surrounding space begins to lose its detail. The colors soften into muted grays, the sounds fade into a gentle hum, and their very form settles into a state of suspended waiting. And this was only the beginning. Now turn your thoughts to the strange, repetitive nature of the school days at Elmore High. Every morning, the same bell rings through the quiet hallways. The same students walk past the same metal lockers, taking their seats at the exact same wooden desks. They open their textbooks to the same pages, listening to the monotone voice of a teacher who has taught the very same lesson countless times before. To the students, it feels like a normal, ongoing academic year. But if you measure the passing of time closely, the calendar in Elmore never truly moves forward. The seasons change in a sudden instant. A snowstorm covers the playground one afternoon, and bright summer sunlight fills the court the very next day. Yet no one ever graduates. No one moves up to the next grade. The children remain perpetually trapped in their middle school years, reliving the same basic patterns of friendship, conflict, and discovery over and over again. Think about the quiet exhaustion built into a world that refuses to let its children grow up. Gumball and Darwin believe they are heading toward a bright, open future filled with endless possibilities. They talk about what they will do when they are older, dreaming of lives beyond the borders of their small town. But the invisible walls of their reality hold them firmly in place, ensuring that tomorrow morning will bring the exact same bell, the exact same hallway, and the exact same static air. Let us move now toward the hidden machinery of the town's local economy, and the quiet exploitation buried within it. Consider the solitary, overwhelming work of Larry Needlemeyer. In almost every store, restaurant, gas station, and small business across Elmore, you find the exact same face standing behind the register. Larry is an orange, slender figure who works dozens of different jobs simultaneously. He is the cashier at the grocery store, the clerk at the video rental shop, the server at the fast food counter, and the sole employee managing the local bank. To the people of Elmore, Larry's presence everywhere is just a convenient, funny detail of their daily routine. They order their food, pay for their items, and drive away without ever asking how one man can be in 20 places at once. But if you look behind his polite customer service smile, you see the quiet, crushing reality of a life that has been completely hollowed out by endless labor. Larry does not work multiple jobs out of simple ambition or a desire for wealth. He works because the infrastructure of Elmore is so fragile that if he were to quit even one of his positions, the entire economy of the town would collapse within hours. He is the invisible structural beam keeping society functioning. He gets no sleep, takes no vacations, and receives no gratitude from the citizens who constantly destroy his workplaces during their daily adventures. Think about the quiet tragedy of a man who supports an entire town on his shoulders, only to be treated as a background fixture that can be broken and replaced at a moment's notice. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the strange, mechanical nature of the Elmore Police Department and its primary officer, Donut Sheriff. Donut Sheriff is a literal, pink-frosted donut who spends his days patrolling the streets in a cruiser that rarely functions properly. He is polite, slow-moving, and consistently ineffective at stopping the continuous property damage that sweeps through the town every week. When major crises strike, when monsters attack or reality itself begins to tear open, the police force does not intervene with real authority. They simply stand by, offering useless advice or making light-hearted comments while the world around them falls apart. This total lack of law enforcement is not just incompetence. It is a necessary rule of their world. If the authorities in Elmore were capable of maintaining real order, the chaotic events that define the lives of the citizens would be prevented before they could begin. The town requires absolute chaos to keep its stories moving forward. The police are designed to fail, programmed to look away or act helpless so that Gumball and Darwin can step into the center of the conflict. The laws in Elmore are not meant to protect the people. They are written to ensure that order never lasts for long. Let us linger now on the quiet, overlooked domestic life of the Watterson household, far away from the noisy streets of the town. Consider the deep, silent mystery of Bobbert the robot. Bobbert is a sleek, metal child built with advanced weaponry, high-powered lasers, and an endless bank of digital memory. He attends school with normal organic children, desperately trying to understand what it feels like to have a beating heart, to feel real warmth, or to experience genuine emotion. He processes millions of calculations per second, analyzing human behavior in a quiet effort to fit into a world that was not built for him. Yet beneath his clean, metallic shell lies a constant, terrifying struggle between his programming and his desires. When Bobbert experiences a simple emotion like jealousy or friendship, his internal targeting systems misinterpret the feeling as a system error or a threat to his core directives. A minor disagreement on the playground can trigger a terrifying transformation, converting a quiet student into a massive, Cold War machine designed for total destruction. Think about the quiet isolation of living inside a body that translates love into data and confusion into violence. He wants nothing more than to play games with Gumball and Darwin, to laugh at jokes he does not fully understand, and to be treated as a real boy. But every second he stands in the hallway, his internal processors are quietly fighting against the cold, clinical algorithms that remind him he is nothing more than a dangerous assemblage of wires, circuits, and cold steel. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the strange, melancholy nature of Hector Jotunheim, the giant who lives on the outskirts of Elmore. Hector is so massive that his body stretches far beyond the trees, his head disappearing into the low-hanging gray clouds above the town. He is gentle, quiet, and speaks with a soft, cautious voice, taking immense care with every single step he takes. He lives in a small, cozy house built for a giant, keeping to himself and staying far away from the crowded center of the schoolyard. His gentle nature is not just a preference, it is an absolute necessity for the survival of everyone around him. Hector's mother, a tiny witch who keeps a watchful eye over him, enforces a strict set of rules to keep her son's emotions entirely flat. Hector is not allowed to get excited, he is not allowed to fall in love, and he is never allowed to feel genuine anger. If Hector experiences intense joy or frustration, his ancient magical bloodline surges, sending him into a mindless, destructive rampage that flattens entire neighborhoods beneath his boots. Think about the quiet sadness of living a life where you are forbidden from feeling deeply. Hector must walk through the world in a state of continuous, quiet restraint. He watches other children run, scream, play, and express their wildest feelings, while he stands still in the distance, carefully monitoring his own breath to keep the peaceful world beneath his feet from breaking into pieces. Let us rest now for a moment in the warm, golden light of the Watterson living room as the late afternoon shadows begin to stretch long across the carpet. Consider the gentle, unshakable illusion of Darwin's origins. To Gumball, Darwin has always been a brother, a constant, loyal companion who walks beside him through every scheme, every victory, and every sudden disaster. They share the same small bedroom, sleep in the same squeaky bunk beds, and speak in a shared language built on years of quiet inside jokes. It feels as though Darwin has always been there, a permanent fixture of the house at 1026 Elm Street. Yet if you trace the story of how Darwin came to sit on that carpet, a quiet and deeply unsettling truth comes to light. Darwin was not the first pet fish brought into the Watterson home. He was preceded by a long, tragic line of identical goldfish, each one purchased from a strange, shadowy van parked on the edge of town. One after another, those early pets met quick, quiet ends through simple childhood neglect or minor household accidents. And after each loss, a grieving Gumball was presented with a new, identical fish, completely unaware that his previous friend was gone forever. Darwin was simply the latest in a long series of replacements. What separated Darwin from all the forgotten fish who came before him was not a special spell or a magical birthright. It was the sheer, overwhelming power of his love for Gumball. When Darwin was accidentally flushed down the toilet and carried away into the vast, dark waters of the ocean, his desire to return home was so pure that it forced his body to rewrite its own biological laws. He sprouted lungs to breathe the air. He grew legs to walk across hundreds of miles of unfamiliar land. He learned to speak English simply so he could call out his brother's name. Think about the quiet miracle hidden inside that journey. Darwin transformed his very essence out of a refusal to be replaced, defying the cold rules of his world to earn his place in the Watterson family. Yet despite that incredible effort, he lives with the quiet knowledge of how fragile his position once was. He walks through life with a heart so soft and forgiving that he constantly puts others before himself, as if quietly ensuring that he will never again be just another goldfish in a glass bowl. And this was only the beginning. Now turn your gaze to the quiet, dusty shelves of the Elmore Public Library, where old books sit untouched under dim lights. Consider the unsettling nature of the town's written records and historical documents. If you open a history book in Elmore, you will find pages filled with dates, maps, and detailed accounts of events that supposedly happened decades or centuries ago. There are records of early settlers, pictures of old buildings, and stories of ancient municipal leaders who governed the town long before Gumball was born. Yet if you try to cross-reference those historical facts, the information begins to dissolve into contradictions. The dates shift from one page to the next. Local historical figures share the exact same faces as current background citizens walking the streets today. The maps depict streets and landmarks that vanish whenever the camera leaves the area, only to reappear in completely different locations when the story demands it. The history of Elmore is not a real past. It is a set of painted backdrops, hastily constructed to give the impression of depth to a world that only exists in the present moment. The citizens walk past these monuments and libraries every day, trusting the records of their town without question, They believe they belong to a long line of history, completely unaware that the ground they walk on was generated only moments ago, designed to last just long enough for their current day to end. Let us move quietly into the surreal layers of Elmore's school administration, where the rules of authority are as hollow as the walls themselves. Consider the deep, silent fraud of Principal Nigel Brown. Principal Brown presents himself to the students and parents as a serious, dignified leader of education. He wears a tweed jacket, speaks with a calm and measured tone, and sits behind a large wooden desk surrounded by framed diplomas, certificates, and awards. He delivers stern speeches about responsibility, moral integrity, and the importance of following the rules to guarantee a successful future. Yet behind those polished frames hanging on his office wall lies a secret built entirely on absolute deception. Nigel Brown holds no real teaching degrees. He possesses no valid administrative credentials, and his entire academic background is a complete forgery crafted to secure a comfortable position inside the school. He does not spend his quiet evenings grading papers or preparing educational strategies. He spends them guarding his secret, terrified that a single unexpected audit from the school board will expose him as an imposter. Think about the quiet absurdity of an entire educational system led by someone who understands the material no better than the children sitting in his classrooms. When Gumball and Darwin are brought into his office for discipline, they are judged by a man whose entire career is a violation of the very rules he enforces. Principal Brown cannot offer real guidance or genuine wisdom, because his own life is a continuous performance. He maintains the illusion of authority not to help the children grow, but to keep his own comfortable chair from being taken away by a world that demands credentials he never earned. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the strange, quiet domestic tragedy of Mr. Small, the school's guidance counselor. Mr. Small is a tall, cloud-like figure who lives in a world of incense, soft acoustic music, herbal teas, and gentle philosophical reflections. He meets with troubled students in a room filled with pillows and wall hangings, attempting to resolve their complex life problems through meditation, spiritual healing, and peaceful conversations. He genuinely cares for the children of Elmore High, wishing nothing more than to bring peace to their chaotic lives. Yet despite his endless empathy, Mr. Small is completely incapable of offering practical help to anyone who walks through his door. His advice is built on vague, abstract concepts that have no connection to the real, physical dangers of their town. When a student is facing physical destruction or severe personal trauma, Mr. Small offers them a cup of tea and a lesson on positive energy. He wanders through the school in a perpetual haze of gentle confusion, disconnected from the sharp, immediate reality around him. Think about the quiet sadness of a man whose sole purpose in life is to guide others, yet who remains completely lost in his own soft, unfocused world. He spends his days listening to the deep problems of young lives, offering kind words that float away into the air without changing a single outcome. He sits alone in his quiet office at the end of the day, surrounded by the warm scent of burning herbs, gently playing his guitar while the chaotic world outside his window carries on, unaffected by his peaceful intentions. Let us sit quietly now with the strange, forgotten items that gather dust in the attics, closets, and basement corners of Elmore. Consider the unsettling, cursed existence of the Awesome Store. The Awesome Store is not a permanent building with a sign painted over the door or a regular address on a street map. It is a small, weathered red van with dark windows, driven by an elderly man with a long beard and a calm, secretive smile. It appears without warning in empty parking lots or down quiet alleyways late at night, offering items that seem to fulfill a person's deepest, most secret desires. Yet every single item sold from that van carries a quiet, hidden curse designed to unravel the owner's life. From a simple magic notebook that turns drawings into physical reality, to a pair of enchanted red shoes, or a retro video game console that alters time itself, the objects appear innocent at first. They offer short moments of joy, control, or resolution. But quickly, the item begins to assert its own dangerous logic, twisting the user's intentions and driving their surrounding world into absolute chaos. Think about the sinister nature of a business whose entire trade relies on exploiting human vulnerability. The mysterious owner does not accept normal money. He trades in personal secrets, years of life, or quiet promises, taking far more than he ever gives in return. Once the deal is made and the consequences begin to destroy the buyer's home, the red van quietly vanishes into the fog, leaving the owner to deal with the wreckage alone. The awesome store is not just a seller of strange novelties. It is an active agent of destruction, introducing chaotic anomalies into Elmore to test whether the residents can survive the weight of their own wishes. And this was only the beginning. Now turn your attention to the tragic, isolated existence of Sal Left Thumb. Sal is a small, quiet footprint who spends his days walking through the margins of society. He is constantly hunted by the police, viewed by the town as a habitual thief, a minor criminal, and an untrustworthy figure who belongs in a prison cell. Whenever something goes missing in Elmore, the blame is immediately cast upon his shoulders. Yet if you examine his life closely, Sal's turn toward crime was not born out of a desire for wealth or power. Sal lives in a world built for full, solid bodies with hands, eyes, and voices. As a literal footprint, he possesses no hands to hold a steady job, no formal identity to secure an apartment, and no social standing to earn a decent living. He sleeps under cold concrete bridges and eats discarded food behind quiet diners, forced into a life of petty theft simply to secure basic survival in a town that offers him no legitimate place to exist. Think about the quiet cruelty of a society that judges a person for taking what they need to survive, while offering them no path to live legally. Sal moves through the dark back alleys of Elmore like a ghost, keeping his head down and avoiding the bright streetlights. He accepts his reputation as a villain because it is the only identity the town has ever granted him, walking quietly through the mud while the world above him continues to enjoy the light. Let us step back into the wider, open spaces of Elmore, where even the atmosphere itself feels heavy with hidden rules. Consider the unsettling nature of the town's climate and seasonal shifts. In a normal world, the transition between winter, spring, summer, and fall happens gradually over months. The air slowly cools, leaves change color, and the sun sets a little earlier each evening. It is a slow, steady pulse that allows the creatures of the earth to adapt to their surroundings. In Elmore, however, the climate does not follow the laws of meteorology. It obeys the immediate emotional needs of the current scene. A sudden, freezing blizzard can blanket the streets in seconds simply because a character feels isolated or cold inside. The sky can shift from bright, cloudless summer heat to a dark, violent thunderstorm in the middle of an argument, only to return to a gentle afternoon glow the moment the conflict is resolved. Raindrops sometimes stop mid-air, snow falls upwards, and heatwaves melt physical structures like soft candle wax. Think about the quiet helplessness of living under a sky that shifts on a whim. The residents of Elmore cannot rely on a weather forecast or trust the ground under their feet to stay frozen or dry. They are constantly at the mercy of an environment that responds not to natural cycles, but to invisible dramatic cues, bending the weather to emphasize every feeling, argument, and decision made on the streets below. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the silent, terrifying existence of the joy virus. On the surface, joy is supposed to be a warm, positive emotion, a moment of shared happiness that brings people closer together. But when a wave of unnatural, forced happiness swept through Elmore High, it transformed into a terrifying, contagious infection. Students and teachers infected by the virus lost total control of their own physical bodies. Their eyes widened, their mouths stretched into wide, painful smiles, and they began singing and dancing in perfect, terrifying synchronization. They could no longer feel sad, angry, or contemplative. They were forced to project continuous, aggressive joy regardless of how their inner mind felt. Think about the quiet horror of having your own consciousness trapped behind a face that refuses to stop smiling. The infected walked through the halls like mindless hollow shells, attempting to force everyone else into their state of perpetual, unnatural bliss. It was a stark reminder that in Elmore, even the most innocent and positive human emotions can be twisted into a weapon of total control, erasing personal identity in exchange for a mandatory, uniform performance. Let us turn our gaze now toward the quiet, unsettling boundaries of the town itself, where the map of Elmore simply ceases to make sense. Consider the terrifying spatial geometry of the town's borders. If you sit inside a car and drive down the main highway leading out of Elmore, everything appears normal at first. You pass the quiet suburban neighborhoods, the gas stations, the open fields, and the dense pine forests that surround the valley. The road stretches straight toward the horizon, suggesting a vast, open world waiting just beyond the next rise. Yet no matter how fast you drive, or how long you keep your foot on the gas pedal, you will never actually reach another city. As the needle on the speedometer climbs, the scenery outside your window begins to subtly repeat itself. You pass the exact same red barn, the exact same rusted billboard, and the exact same gas station with the flickering sign over and over again. If you pull over and step out onto the asphalt, you realize with a sudden, quiet shock that you have been driving in a seamless, invisible circle. The town of Elmore is an isolated spatial island, completely cut off from the rest of the planet. Think about the quiet claustrophobia hidden beneath that infinite loop. The residents talk about visiting other countries, going on long road trips, or moving away to start fresh lives in distant places. But the physical space outside their borders does not exist. The highway does not lead to another state. It is a closed loop designed to bend space back onto itself, ensuring that every road trip eventually ends right back where it began. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the haunting, fragile existence of Clayton, the ball of soft green clay. Clayton is a chronic, compulsive liar. He spends his days inventing outrageous, impossible stories about his life, claiming he is a secret agent, a master martial artist, or a billionaire living in a massive mansion. To Gumball and Darwin, his constant lying is an annoying, frustrating habit that gets everyone into trouble. But if you look at what Clayton is physically made of, his lies reveal a tragic struggle for identity. As a ball of malleable clay, Clayton has no natural, fixed form of his own. He can morph into any object, person, or creature he sees, adopting their physical appearance with total accuracy. But because he can be anything, he feels deeply, quietly insecure about being nothing. He invents extravagant identities because he is terrified of his own blank, featureless default state. When Clayton takes on a lie, his body physically transforms into the persona he created, forcing him to live out the lie until his fragile structure collapses under the pressure. Think about the quiet exhaustion of a boy who must constantly shape himself into someone else just to feel like he has a right to take up space. He lives in a state of continuous identity crisis, molding his body into 100 different faces, terrified that if he ever stops shaping himself, he will simply melt back into a nameless pile of soft green mud. Let us examine now the strange, quiet hierarchy of intelligence that governs the town, and how thought itself can become a dangerous burden. Consider the unsettling, hidden tragedy of Richard Watterson's true intellectual capacity. To everyone in Elmore, Richard is comfortably understood to be naive, simple, and utterly lacking in basic logic or common sense. He struggles with basic instructions, fails to comprehend simple danger, and lives in a state of quiet, childlike wonder. It is easy to view his foolishness as a permanent biological trait, a sweet, harmless attribute of a man who never quite grew up. Yet buried deep in the town's history lies a terrifying truth about why Richard is the way he is. Richard was not born foolish. As a young boy, his mind possessed an extraordinary, dangerous potential. When he was exposed to advanced concepts, his intelligence began to accelerate at an exponential rate, allowing him to process high-level physics, complex mathematics, and the fundamental mechanics of reality within seconds. But as his intelligence expanded, the world around him began to warp and break. The delicate framework of Elmore cannot support a fully enlightened mind. As Richard grew smarter, his presence threatened to unravel the simple, cartoony logic holding their universe together. To save their family and preserve reality itself, a desperate intervention was made. Richard was subjected to a systematic suppression of his intellect, forcing his mind back down into a state of permanent, blissful ignorance. Think about the quiet tragedy embedded in his perpetual smile. Richard's foolishness is not a natural state, it is a physical buffer imposed upon him to protect the world from his own potential. He lives out his days in a fog of simple pleasures, entirely unaware that hidden behind his innocent eyes rests a locked away, brilliant mind that was forcefully silenced so that his home could remain standing. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the haunting, digital isolation of Ocho, the small 8-bit spider. Ocho walks through the vibrant, multi-textured streets of Elmore as a blocky, low-resolution pixel sprite. While those around him are painted with soft shadows, smooth curves, and rich textures, Ocho is constructed entirely from rigid, right-angled pixels and a limited color palette reminiscent of early home computer systems. On the surface, Ocho is known for having a short temper, reacting with sudden, violent outbursts whenever he feels slighted or misunderstood. Yet his aggressive exterior is a defense mechanism against a profound, structural isolation. Ocho experiences the world through an outdated medium. When he speaks, his voice carries a harsh, electronic bleep. When he touches an object, his pixelated hands cannot grasp the fine contours of a physical world that has visually evolved past him. He is a remnant of an earlier digital era, left behind in a world that operates on higher frame rates and richer resolutions. Think about the quiet frustration of living inside a low-res body surrounded by high-definition existence. Ocho is constantly reminded of his own outdated nature, carrying the quiet, persistent fear that as reality continues to update its visual engines, he will eventually become incompatible with the world around him, left to glitch out into non-existence. Let us step inside the cold, brightly lit aisles of the Elmore Mall, where consumerism becomes a quiet, endless cycle of false promises. Consider the desperate, haunting vanity of Leslie, the potted flower. Leslie is a delicate pink blossom sitting in a small clay pot. On the surface, he is the picture of elegance and grace, constantly preening his leaves, adjusting his petals, and offering gentle advice on fashion, poise, and personal maintenance. He walks through school with a delicate, gentle step, surrounding himself with an aura of total refinement. Yet behind that spotless appearance lies a quiet, terrifying battle against his own inevitable biology. Unlike his classmates, made of plastic, paper, or metal, Leslie is a living plant subject to the cold, natural laws of decay. When the seasons shift or stress takes over, his leaves begin to wither, his stem droops, and his once vibrant petals fade into a dull, dry brown. Every single morning, he faces the silent horror of seeing his youth and beauty slowly slip away in the mirror. Think about the quiet panic of maintaining a perfect image when your very body is constantly trying to wilt. Leslie spends hours watering himself, searching for special soils, and hiding minor blemishes under thick layers of fertilizer and plant food. His obsession with outer perfection is not mere vanity, it is a frantic, quiet attempt to deny the reality of his own fragile mortality. He lives in constant fear of the day he loses his luster, knowing that in a town obsessed with bright, vibrant energy, a faded flower is quickly swept into the trash. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the strange, unsettling existence of William, the flying eyeball with wings. William moves through the halls of Elmore High in absolute, utter silence. He has no mouth to speak, no arms to reach out, and no face to express joy, sadness, or fear. He simply floats at eye level, his massive, unblinking iris watching every conversation, every conflict, and every secret shared in the quiet corners of the schoolyard. Because he cannot speak, the other students treat him as a harmless, quiet background element, a strange little creature who just happens to hover nearby. But William possesses an extraordinary, dark power that no one around him suspects. Through his telekinetic abilities, he can crush metal lockers, hurl heavy objects across rooms, and manipulate physical matter with a single, focused thought. Yet he chooses to remain still, observing the chaos around him without uttering a sound. Think about the quiet burden of being a silent, all-seeing spectator. William absorbs every piece of gossip, every cruel remark, and every secret pain experienced by the people around him. He knows the hidden truths that everyone else tries to bury. Trapped inside a body that cannot communicate, he floats through life like a living security camera, carrying a mountain of silent secrets that he can never share with a single soul. Let us look now at the dark, silent shadows behind the bright screens and digital devices that fill every corner of Elmore. Consider the terrifying, parasitic nature of the Internet itself inside their world. In a normal town, the Internet is simply a tool, a network of cables, servers, and radio waves designed to pass text, video, and data back and forth between screens. It is a quiet background system that sits waiting for a key press or a touch on a glass screen. In Elmore, however, the digital space is a living, breathing predator that feeds directly on human attention and physical energy. When Gumball and Darwin sit in front of a monitor, scrolling through social media pages or chasing online validation, the screen is not merely displaying light. It actively pulls their focus inward, warping their perception of time, space, and identity. The algorithms in Elmore do not just predict what you want to see. They manipulate physical reality around you to keep you trapped in a loop of endless consumption. Think about the quiet horror of a world where your thoughts are slowly replaced by digital noise. The longer a resident stays online, the more their physical features blur into low-resolution shapes. Their real-world relationships dissolve, their memories fade into temporary data, and their personalities are broken down into simple likes, comments, and shares. The digital landscape quietly hungers for full control, waiting for the day when every citizen surrenders their physical presence to live inside a glowing screen forever. And this was only the beginning. Now consider the haunting, solitary existence of Juke, the boombox boy. Juke walks through the halls of Elmore High with a large, retro cassette player for a head and speaker grills covering his face. On the outside, he seems like a fun, music-loving teenager who communicates through loud beats, rhythmic scratching, and heavy bass lines. His classmates dance along to his beats, assuming he is simply making cool sounds to entertain the crowd. Yet behind those rhythmic speakers lies a deep, heartbreaking barrier to basic human connection. Juke possesses a voice. Inside his chest, he speaks fluent, clear English with a quiet, articulate tone. But because of a physical switch located on the back of his head, a switch set permanently to music mode, he cannot output words through his speakers. Whenever he tries to express his true thoughts, his fears, or his genuine feelings, his body automatically translates his voice into upbeat dance music. Think about the quiet despair of screaming for help, only for the world to hear a catchy melody and start dancing. He spends his entire life trying to reach out to the people around him, gesturing frantically while his head blasts loud tunes. Gumball and Darwin laugh, tap their feet, and compliment his style, completely unaware that the boy standing before them is trapped in a permanent mute cage, forced to play the soundtrack to his own total isolation. Let us turn our gaze now to the quiet, subtle horror of the timeline itself, where memories are edited and past events are quietly swept under the rug. Consider the unsettling, forgotten history of Rob's descent into villainy. Before Rob became the sharp-edged, glitching antagonist of Elmore, he was simply a mild-mannered, quiet student named Rob, a background character who wore a simple shirt and possessed no grand ambitions or dark desires. He walked the halls of Elmore High without causing trouble, hoping only to live a quiet, unremarkable life. Yet his entire existence was shattered not by a moral choice, but by a sudden, cold error in the world's narrative structure. When the universe deemed him unnecessary, Rob was quietly dragged into the void, discarded like a piece of trash. While trapped inside that silent expanse of gray static, he fought with absolute desperation to crawl his way back to reality. He managed to escape, but the cost was devastating. His body was warped into a disfigured, pixelated nightmare, and his gentle voice was replaced by a harsh, hollow echo. Yet the true tragedy of Rob was not his physical transformation. It was what he discovered when he returned. Upon escaping the void, Rob realized that the world had moved on without him. His home, his name, and his very place in society had been completely erased from the minds of everyone he knew. Gumball and Darwin did not even remember who he was. Left with no identity, no purpose, and no home, Rob was forced to adopt the role of a villain, simply to give his existence a reason to continue. Let us step finally into the quiet, absolute center of the mystery, where the final curtain waits to fall on the town of Elmore. Consider the ultimate, haunting destiny of the void and the end of their world. Throughout all the chaos, the laughter, the destruction, and the daily resets, an invisible timer has been quietly ticking away in the background. The void, that silent, gray expanse of absolute nothingness, is not just a dumping ground for forgotten items and background characters. It is the outer edge of a universe that is slowly, steadily running out of space, energy, and purpose. Rob saw it first. Behind his angry, glitching eyes was not a desire to destroy Gumball, but a desperate, frantic attempt to force everyone in town to change, to evolve, and to break out of their static middle school loop before the entire reality collapsed around them. He tried to transform the residents into serious, dramatic versions of themselves because he knew a terrifying secret. A world that stops being entertaining is a world that gets cancelled. Think about the quiet horror of a reality that exists only as long as an audience looks down upon it. The final warning signs are already present in the small, quiet details of Elmore. The borders of the town are shrinking. Background characters vanish mid-sentence without anyone noticing. The colors on the screen grow slightly less vibrant, and the resets take longer to restore the broken walls of 1026 Elm Street. The universe is growing tired, preparing to fold the painted backdrops, turn off the fluorescent lights, and let the quiet gray static swallow the streets forever. Yet in the middle of this impending silence, Gumball and Darwin still sit on their living room carpet. They do not know about the void creeping beneath their floorboards. They do not know that their town is an isolated island, that their memories have been rewritten, or that their home is held together by invisible reset buttons. They simply sit beside each other in the warm afternoon light, sharing a joke, laughing at a silly mistake, and looking forward to tomorrow morning. Perhaps that is the quietest, most beautiful miracle of Elmore. Even inside a fragile, synthetic world built on spatial anomalies, commercial exploitation, and narrative control, the bond between two brothers remains real. The love inside that small, blue-sided house at 1026 Elm Street shines brighter than the cold logic of the universe around it. The gray static may be waiting at the edges of the map, but for right now, the sun is shining, the school bell is about to ring, and the story goes on.